Paris, 1941. Under blinding stage lights, a woman bows as the audience erupts in applause. In her hands are sheet music pages, smudged with ink no one can see. Hidden between the notes are military secrets meant for London. She smiles, laughs, and sings, while enemy officers watch from the front row. This is Josephine Baker, a global star turned invisible weapon. How did a performer become one of the safest couriers in a continent at war? The secret was not hidden in a briefcase or stitched into a coat. It was written directly onto her music. Using invisible ink, lines of intelligence appeared harmless, lyrics, notes, rehearsal marks, until heat revealed routes, names, troop movements. When border guards flipped through her sheets, they saw only a singer's repertoire. What they never questioned was the assumption beneath it, that an entertainer could not be dangerous. Josephine Baker understood that assumption better than anyone. She cultivated it. At receptions and diplomatic dinners, officers talked freely in front of her, boasting, complaining, letting details slip. She listened, memorized, and later transferred fragments of war into melody and paper. Each performance doubled as a delivery. Each curtain call marked another successful transfer of intelligence. Even illness did not stop the work. Traveling through North Africa while seriously unwell, she carried documents others would have been executed for possessing. Her fame became a shield. Her race and profession became camouflage. The more visible she was on stage, the more invisible she became to counterintelligence. What makes this detail extraordinary is not just the ingenuity of invisible ink, but the strategy behind it. This was espionage without gunfire, resistance without uniforms. It relied on psychology, on prejudice, arrogance, and the blind spots of power. The enemy searched for spies in shadows and safe houses. They did not look at the woman singing in the spotlight. And that was precisely why the information arrived safely. Over and over again. Long before Europe collapsed into war, Josephine Baker had already learned how to survive inside hostile systems. Born in St. Louis in 1906, she grew up in poverty and racial violence, witnessing riots and lynchings that taught her an early lesson. Danger often wears a familiar face. By the time she reached Paris in the 1920s, she understood how societies assign value and how easily they dismiss those they choose not to take seriously. Paris embraced her in ways America never had. On its stages, she became an icon of modernity, freedom, and spectacle. By the late 1930s, her name opened doors across Europe's elite circles. Ambassadors, industrialists, and military officers attended her performances, shared tables with her, and spoke freely in her presence. What they saw was a celebrity. What they did not see was someone trained by experience to listen carefully, remember precisely, and move between worlds without being fully claimed by any of them. When France fell in 1940, the city's glamour curdled into fear. Uniforms replaced evening wear. Conversations lowered to whispers. Borders hardened. Intelligence became the most valuable currency in Europe, and networks scrambled to protect their lines of communication. Couriers were arrested. Radios were triangulated. A single mistake meant torture or execution. Traditional espionage routes were collapsing under surveillance. This was the environment in which Baker's unusual value became clear. She could still travel. She could still host gatherings. She could still cross checkpoints with relative ease. Her fame functioned as a passport. Her performances as plausible reasons to move. The occupying forces, shaped by racial and gender prejudice, underestimated her by default. To them, she was decoration, entertainment for officers far from home. That miscalculation would persist throughout the war. Crucially, Baker was not acting alone or impulsively. She was integrated into organized resistance efforts that understood the need for unconventional assets. Intelligence in wartime is not only about access to secrets. It is about moving information safely from one place to another. And in a landscape where suspicion was deadly, the safest courier was often the one no one thought to search. Her world became a strange duality. By night, She performed for audiences that included enemy officers. By day, she met handlers, transferred notes, memorized details. The same smile that disarmed a room protected information that could change the course of operations elsewhere. Every appearance carried risk. Every journey carried consequences. Yet the greatest danger was not arrest, it was exposure. If the illusion cracked, there would be no escape, no prison exchange, no mercy. The stage lights that shielded her could just as easily mark her for death. The question was no longer whether her fame could protect her. It was how long it could hold. As the war tightened its grip on Europe, the margin for error vanished. Counterintelligence units refined their methods. Travel permissions narrowed. Informants multiplied. Even those protected by status were no longer untouchable. In this climate, the very qualities that had made Baker useful, visibility, movement, access, became sources of escalating danger. Enemy intelligence began to scrutinize cultural spaces more closely. Concert halls, hotels, and diplomatic receptions were no longer neutral ground. They were potential listening posts. Officers learned to measure what was said in public and what was not. The casual arrogance that once fueled loose talk began to harden into caution. The room for accidental disclosure shrank, forcing resistance couriers to take greater risks to extract the same amount of information. For Baker, risk compounded on several fronts at once. She was a woman in male-dominated military circles. She was a Black American navigating racial hierarchies that alternated between fetishization and contempt. And she was an entertainer, publicly celebrated, privately surveilled. Each identity provided cover in one moment and exposure in the next. Any single misstep could collapse the illusion. Travel grew more perilous by the month. Borders that had once opened for a signature now required inspections, interrogations, and searches. Luggage was rifled through. Papers were examined under lamps. The simplest journey could end in a detention room. To continue operating, Baker had to rely on memory rather than documents, on misdirection rather than concealment. Information was absorbed in fragments and later reconstructed, transferred only when the opportunity felt survivable. Illness added another layer of threat. Severe health problems forced hospitalizations and long recoveries, moments when mobility and control were stripped away. A bedridden courier is a liability. A famous one draws attention. Yet even then, the work did not fully stop. Messages waited. Routes reopened. The war did not pause for weakness. What made this phase especially dangerous was the narrowing of exits. Many resistance figures operated with the knowledge that capture might still allow for silence, escape, or exchange. Baker's position offered none of that. If exposed, she would not disappear into a prison system. Her name would be used as proof, her arrest as spectacle. The consequences would extend beyond her life to everyone connected to her. And still, the demands increased. Intelligence needed to move between continents as the war expanded southward into North Africa. Routes shifted. Handlers adapted. The expectation was clear. Use whatever still works. And fame, improbably, still worked. Each appearance now carried calculation. Which tables to approach. Which conversations to steer. Which silences to keep. The work relied less on boldness than on restraint, on knowing when not to ask, when not to react, when to let an officer talk himself into revealing more than he intended. The enemy searched for networks built on radios, codes, and weapons. They underestimated a system built on human behavior. But underestimation does not equal safety. It only delays discovery. By the time Baker prepared for her most dangerous movements, the protection of novelty had worn thin. The war was older, sharper, less forgiving. One failure would be enough. The stage lights still burned. The applause still came. But now they illuminated a narrowing path, one that led either to success or to irreversible exposure. The work was never a single act. It was a rhythm. Gather, hold, move, release, repeated under constantly shifting conditions. Baker's intelligence operations depended on understanding people as much as procedures. She listened in rooms designed for leisure, where officers relaxed their guard and mistook proximity for trust. Complaints about supply shortages, offhand remarks about troop movements, casual boasts meant to impress. All of it was cataloged mentally, then stripped of emotion and reassembled as usable information. What made her role effective was precision. She did not chase secrets. She let them come to her. At receptions, she positioned herself near clusters where conversation flowed fastest. She asked nothing that sounded like a question. Instead, she reacted, surprised, amused, flattered, prompting others to fill the silence. The intelligence she gathered was often incomplete on its own, but devastating when combined with fragments collected elsewhere. Resistance handlers understood this. They did not expect blueprints. They expected patterns. Transfer required discipline. Notes were never carried in obvious form. When writing was unavoidable, invisible ink transformed intelligence into harmless marks on sheet music, lyrics, stage cues, reminders. To an inspector, the pages confirmed her identity as a performer. To those who knew how to read them, they mapped enemy intentions. The brilliance of the method lay not in novelty, but in plausibility. Nothing about the material contradicted who she was supposed to be. Movement was equally calculated. Travel routes were chosen for legitimacy rather than speed. Performances justified border crossings. Medical treatment justified extended stays. Every document matched a public explanation. Fame acted as lubrication through bureaucratic friction. Delays were smoothed by recognition. Suspicion dulled by familiarity. The enemy believed they knew who she was. That belief did most of the work. Coordination with handlers was cautious and infrequent. Too much contact invited exposure. Too little risked misalignment. Meetings occurred in neutral spaces, timed to appear coincidental. Information passed verbally whenever possible, relying on memory rather than paper. This demanded a different kind of endurance, the ability to carry details across days or weeks without writing them down, without reacting to their implications, without letting fear distort recall. As operations expanded beyond Europe into North Africa, the stakes increased. The distance to Allied intelligence centers lengthened. The value of accurate, timely information multiplied. Baker's journeys grew longer, more exhausting, more visible. Illness weakened her physically, but it also reinforced her cover. A celebrated performer seeking treatment drew sympathy, not suspicion. The very vulnerability that should have ended her usefulness instead prolonged it. This was espionage built on performance, not deception through disguise, but deception through authenticity. She did not pretend to be someone else. She leaned fully into who the world believed her to be. The line between life and mission blurred until there was no separation left. Every successful transfer deepened the illusion. Every safe arrival encouraged greater reliance on the method. But reliance breeds exposure, and with each operation completed, the cost of failure grew heavier. As reliance on her methods grew, so did the complexity of what she carried. Intelligence was no longer limited to isolated remarks or general impressions. It became connective tissue, details that, when aligned with other reports, clarified enemy priorities and vulnerabilities. Timing mattered, accuracy mattered, and above all, discretion mattered. A single overheard name delivered too early or too late could mislead entire operations. The process demanded an unusual discipline, emotional neutrality. Baker absorbed information without reacting to its implications. She could hear about impending offensives, shortages, or redeployments, and then step on stage hours later, smiling beneath lights, performing as if nothing weighed on her memory. This compartmentalization was not accidental. It was survival. Any visible strain invited questions. Any deviation from expectation risked scrutiny. Handlers adapted to her strengths. They minimized written instructions. They framed objectives broadly, trusting her judgment in the field. When circumstances changed, as they often did, she adjusted without waiting for confirmation. This autonomy was rare and dangerous, but necessary. Conventional chains of command were too slow for the environments she moved through. Her effectiveness depended on improvisation within clear boundaries. Collect what comes freely, never force access, never repeat a pattern. North Africa marked a turning point. The geographic shift expanded the reach of the information she carried and multiplied the hazards along the route. Sea crossings, longer inspections, unfamiliar authorities. Each added variables she could not control. Yet the logic of her cover held. Performances justified presence. Illness justified delays. Fame justified exceptions. What seemed fragile from the outside proved resilient in practice. The most remarkable aspect of these operations was how little they resembled espionage as commonly imagined. There were no dead drops, no coded radio transmissions, no dramatic escapes. Instead, there was continuity, applause, travel schedules, conversations that appeared trivial until they were assembled elsewhere into strategic clarity. The danger lay not in sudden confrontation, but in cumulative exposure, the slow tightening of attention as patterns emerged. She responded by changing tempo, fewer journeys, longer stays, wider spacing between transfers. Intelligence was allowed to mature before moving, reducing frequency while increasing value. This patience ran counter to wartime urgency, but it preserved the method. It kept suspicion diffuse. It extended the life of the operation. By the time the war began to tilt decisively, much of what she had done remained invisible by design. Success in this role meant erasure. There would be no battlefield citation, no moment of public recognition. The information flowed onward, detached from its source, absorbed into larger systems that rarely recorded where it came from. That invisibility was both protection and price. It kept her alive through missions that would have killed others. And it ensured that when the outcomes appeared, strategic adjustments, successful maneuvers, the contribution would be impossible to trace back to the woman who sang while carrying the war inside her memory. By the final phase of the war, the margin for invisibility had narrowed to almost nothing. Intelligence networks were under pressure from every direction. Arrests had exposed routes. Interrogations had revealed fragments of methods. The occupying forces no longer trusted appearances alone. They trusted patterns. And patterns, once noticed, could not be unseen. For Baker, this meant that every movement now carried amplified consequence. What had once passed as coincidence risked being read as intent. Border crossings were slower, inspections longer, questions sharper. Officials no longer glanced at her papers and waved her through. They looked twice, sometimes 3 times. The protection of novelty was gone. Her health deteriorated further. Travel that once exhausted her now threatened to collapse her entirely. Fever, pain, and weakness became constant companions. Yet this physical decline created a dangerous paradox. To withdraw suddenly would draw attention. To cancel appearances would invite scrutiny. Continuity, appearing as though nothing had changed, became essential. The most dangerous missions were not those involving the largest volume of information, but those conducted under the thinnest cover. By now, enemy intelligence understood that resistance activity often hid in unexpected places. Cultural figures were no longer entirely dismissed. The assumption that entertainers were harmless had eroded. Not fully, but enough. At this stage, Baker's role shifted subtly from active gathering to preservation and delivery. The information she carried was refined, verified, and time-sensitive. It was no longer about accumulation. It was about arrival. Delays could cost lives. Errors could misdirect operations. The burden of accuracy intensified. There was no dramatic confrontation, no single moment where weapons were drawn or alarms sounded. The climax of her work unfolded in sustained tension, weeks where exposure felt imminent, where every official glance lingered too long, where every routine question seemed designed to test consistency. Survival depended on memory, restraint, and control. What made this phase especially perilous was the absence of contingency. If arrested, her fame would not save her. It would condemn her. A public figure implicated in resistance, work would be exploited, displayed, used as warning. There would be no anonymity, no quiet disappearance. The stage that once protected her would amplify her destruction. And still, the operations continued. Performances proceeded. Travel resumed. Intelligence crossed borders. This was the moment when the true cost of her method became clear. She could not separate the mission from her identity. There was no uniform to remove, no alias to abandon. If the network failed, she would fail with it, publicly and irreversibly. As Allied momentum increased and the structure of occupation began to fracture, the urgency peaked. Information needed to move faster than the collapsing systems that once controlled it. Baker's final contributions were shaped by this acceleration. Shorter windows, fewer intermediaries, greater reliance on trust. Then, gradually, the pressure began to lift. Not suddenly, not cleanly, but enough to be felt. Routes reopened. Inspections loosened. The war's end approached unevenly, leaving behind a trail of risks that had narrowly been avoided. When victory finally came, there was no definitive signal that her most dangerous moment had passed. No announcement, no confirmation, only the quiet realization that the stage lights no longer concealed something lethal. They were just lights again. The climax of her story did not end with applause or arrest. It ended with survival, an outcome so fragile and so unlikely that it felt almost accidental. And survival in this case carried its own consequences. When the war finally receded, it did not do so cleanly. The machinery of occupation collapsed in fragments, leaving behind archives that were incomplete, testimonies that were partial, and contributions that were deliberately obscured. For those whose work depended on invisibility, this aftermath was especially unforgiving. Josephine Baker emerged alive, but largely unacknowledged. The intelligence she had helped move did not carry signatures. The routes it informed were not footnoted. Success had been designed to erase its sources, and the erasure held. What could be publicly recognized was limited, delayed, and framed in general terms. Decorations existed, but details remained sealed. The story could not be told the way battlefield heroism could be told. In the immediate post-war years, attention shifted elsewhere. Reconstruction demanded narratives of victory that were simple and legible. Espionage without explosions did not fit easily. Neither did the idea that art, celebrity, and social access had played a strategic role. The public returned to seeing her, as they always had, a performer. The war receded into a background she was not expected to inhabit. There were costs to that simplification. The physical toll of wartime travel and illness lingered. The psychological burden, years of compartmentalization, vigilance, and restraint, did not evaporate with peace. The habits that had kept her alive proved difficult to unlearn. Silence had been essential. Silence remained. Yet fragments of recognition surfaced over time. Military honors acknowledged service rendered quietly and at risk. Testimonies from within resistance circles confirmed what official records could not fully describe. These acknowledgments mattered, but they never matched the scale of the danger endured. They arrived without spectacle, consistent with a contribution that had been built to avoid it. What the aftermath revealed most clearly was a contradiction at the heart of wartime memory. The qualities that had made her effective, visibility without suspicion, access without authority, influence without force, were precisely the qualities that made her difficult to categorize afterward. History prefers clear roles. Hers had been deliberately ambiguous. As peace settled, she redirected her public life toward causes shaped by the same principles that had guided her wartime actions: dignity, autonomy, and resistance to systems that thrived on exclusion. The war did not end her sense of obligation. It refined it. The outcome of her story was not a single result, but a pattern. Information delivered, lives indirectly affected, a network sustained long enough to matter, survival achieved without exposure, and a legacy split between what could be celebrated and what had to remain unspoken. What remained unresolved was not whether her work had value. It was whether history would ever learn how to see it. History often remembers war through images of force, soldiers advancing, weapons firing, cities burning. It is less comfortable with victories that leave no wreckage behind. Josephine Baker's legacy sits precisely in that discomfort. Her contribution did not destroy enemy positions. It exposed enemy assumptions. It did not rely on strength, it relied on insight. What she demonstrated was a different model of resistance, one that understood power as perception and survival as strategy. By embracing the role the world assigned to her, she turned expectation into camouflage. The stage became cover. Applause became misdirection. The very visibility that should have made her vulnerable became her shield. This story forces an uncomfortable question. How many acts of resistance have been overlooked because they did not conform to familiar images of heroism? How many contributions were discounted because they emerged from art, from culture, from identities dismissed as decorative or peripheral? Baker's wartime work suggests that intelligence does not always travel through secrecy alone. Sometimes it moves through spaces designed to be seen. Her legacy also exposes a deeper injustice. Recognition often favors those whose actions can be displayed, those whose victories can be measured. For individuals like Baker, success meant anonymity, and anonymity delayed remembrance. The cost of effectiveness was erasure, and yet the impact remains. Networks survived long enough to function. Information crossed borders when others could not. Lives were shaped, some saved, by decisions informed by fragments she carried. These outcomes do not appear on monuments, but they exist in the structure of history itself. Remembering Josephine Baker in this context is not an act of nostalgia. It is an act of correction. It widens the definition of courage and challenges the boundaries of what we consider resistance. It reminds us that war is not only fought with weapons, but with intelligence, creativity, and the willingness to exploit injustice against itself. In the end, her story leaves us with a final reflection. The most dangerous person in a system is often not the one who hides in the shadows, but the one who stands in plain sight and is never truly seen.